Okay, YouTubers, this is Joe from ArtAlienTV. Now today we're looking at a new set of images from the Curiosity rover, and I've got them up here. This is the Curiosity rover Sol 2967, okay? And I've made a Gigapan of this. I haven't uploaded it to my Gigapan site yet to save time, but by the time you see this video, the links will be in the description for the Gigapan on the Gigapan site and for the original images and everything else, okay? So I'm going to crack straight on with it to save time. What we got here is a really nice view of the lower slopes of Mount Sharp. We've got this large mound here, which I've been looking at for years. Very strange, this one. And in front of it, we've got some structures and exposed block work. And over here, we've got this long butte here, which I've also been looking at for a long time, which has structure to it, which I'm going to show you in a minute as well. But the first thing I found on this Gigapan was this, and what we have here is a very large skull. Initially it looks like just a rock, like a lot of these things do, but when you look at it more closely, it's not. It's a Martian, and it's one of hundreds I found so far in this area, and is very large. I would say it's somewhere in the realm of about 15 to 20 inches height. Okay, so that's rather large, bearing in mind a human skull on the, if I draw a rough sort of shape for you, I'll give you an idea of how big this is compared to a human skull. Human skulls are about 8 or 9 inches in height. This is double that. So a human skull would be approximately this big, okay? That's how big a human skull would be, about that big, right? This is way, way bigger and is very similar to some I've found before in the recent years, and is very strange. When you look at it, it's got a very, very large cranium, comes right round. We've got lots of texture and brain-like structures to it, almost like a brain coral. And you can actually see quite a clear nose here with nostrils. Eye here, another one here, mouth here, and this huge, huge skull. Here's the chin, jaw comes up like this, and there's the face there, okay? You can see the details, there's the cheekbone coming in like that. There isn't a great deal of detail. Unfortunately, these images are slightly out of focus. They're quite dark. In this Gigapan, what I've done is I've brightened it up by 15% and added 15% contrast and brightness, basically, because it's a bit dull. When you look at the actual original images here, they're a bit dark. Let's look at one here. They're a little bit dark and a bit muddy, and they've also got this grid pattern on, which you can remove by blurring the image very slightly by about 1%-ish or less, and that will get rid of this grid. When you zoom in, you can see this grid pattern on the image, okay? If I show you it, you can see the grid. You need to blur it to get rid of that, okay? If you're going to work with these images. And basically, what we've got here is a really interesting view, because we've got, not only do we have this giant skull, which is at least twice the height of a human skull, which would make it, if the brain on this thing would be huge. I would estimate it to be between 6 and 10 times the size of a human brain, okay? Because if you work it out, if you've got a round skull, for instance, let's just say, if I do one here like this. Now, of course, this is three-dimensional, right? Now, a human skull is about this big, right? So you could fit 4 human skulls, at least the brain part of the skull, the cavity, the brain cavity. You could fit 4 here, and then another 4 behind that. So you would actually have 8. So it's approximately 8 times the size, brain capacity of a human being, okay? A normal human being. So this is huge. And I do have other examples. So if you're new to this channel, I will put some clips of some of the other ones that I found in at the end of this video for you to look at, just to prove I'm not making this up. This is one of many, okay? Most of them aren't this big. Most of them are quite small, human size, a bit less or a bit larger. There are many different types of humanoids on Mars. There's at least 4 or 5 different types. Some are quite small, some are very large, like this. I will put some examples of each in at the end for you to have a look at, just in case you're new to this channel, but those that have been on this channel for a while would have seen them already. So I'm not going to go on about that for too long. But basically it's a skull, and it's pretty obvious, even though these images are a little bit dark and a bit blurred and a bit gloomy. The point is, there is a reason for that. Reason one is that the mass camera on the Curiosity rover is set to landscape mode, which means that when you zoom in, everything is a little bit blurred, okay? Not only that, I've had to apply a little bit of blur to get rid of the grid on the image, okay, which doesn't help. So what I've done, I've also brightened this up and sharpened it a very tiny amount. Sharpening these images does not make them better. In fact, it usually makes them worse, unless you use a very small amount, okay? But also, the other reason why these images are a bit dull and gloomy is basically that Mars is much further away from the sun and has about approximately 40% less sunlight on the surface. Okay, so if you compare it to Earth or a moon, which could be, our moon could get very bright indeed because it's got literally no atmosphere and there's nothing blocking the sun, so it gets very bright and reflective. Mars is millions and millions of miles away, further away than we are from the sun, so it is a bit darker. And often you get a lot of dust in the atmosphere as well, which makes that even worse. So the images are a bit dull, unfortunately, and there's nothing I can do about that, but you can enhance them to a point. Now, let's have a look at the other things in this image. I'll come back to that skull a bit later. One thing that really stood out to me was this here, this long ridge line. Now, I've been looking at this ridge line for a long time, but from much further away, and I noticed these structures on the side here. Right, you can see them even in the Gigapan, which isn't really enhanced. It's only been brightened a bit. You can see these structures on the side, and what I've done is I've taken a clip of that and I've enhanced the contrast on it and the colour, and I put it down here. This is a building. This is not a butte. NASA calls them buttes, but just because NASA calls something doesn't mean it is that. As I've shown before on my channel, they often call things by very bland, boring names and don't really try to explain what things are. Like these giant veg that I've found, they call them dunes, icy dunes or frosty dunes. These are called frosty dunes. These are called, this is called these are called fans. They call these things fans. These are plants growing on the surface, okay? These are plants. So they've got these really stupid names for things, and they don't really call things what they are. And I think it's deliberate deception, in fact. And there's an awful lot more going on Mars than we're told. And there's plants, and there's buildings, there's statues, there's mummified remains, there's even possible living Martians popping up now and again to have a look at the rover, it seems. Okay. So we've got all sorts of things. There's even remains on the ground that look like robots and wreckage and all sorts of stuff like ships. And there's buildings everywhere. And if you're familiar with my channel, you would have seen a lot of that already. Okay, but basically, what we have here is a ruined building. It's not just a butte. This is the top part of the structure, obviously at the top there, with this ridge. And then we've got these structures coming down like this. And we've got a straight structure kind of coming down there, and another one here, which kind of comes down like that. We've got this other part here, comes across like that. These are part of the construction, and you can see these various parts, right? This is not just a butte. We've got angular apex-like structure here, and these were possible different sections, or what I would call chambers, okay? Because what I think these structures are, a lot of them, not only are they buildings, but they also contain burials, a lot of them. I'm not sure if this one does or not, because we're not really close enough to see what's around it, but I would not be surprised at all if there were dozens of burials inside this long barrow, okay? This is a burial, possibly a burial structure, but it may actually just be a building. And I couldn't tell you if this is a burial structure yet, because we need to get closer and have a look around the bottom. If it's surrounded with skulls and stuff like that, then maybe it is. But what I think they were doing with these structures, they were basically building an apex style shape, a bit like this one here. Now this is further over to the right of the Gigapan here, and you can see we've got this kind of apex structure. Now let's do that again. That wasn't very good. Now this is obviously heavily eroded and ruined, right? But they were making these bunker shape sort of structures, right? And you can see the block work here, right? Heavily eroded, of course, but you can see the block work, right? This is a building, the top part of a building. And you can see over here, once you know it's there, you can see that this is a building also, because we have these different dividing sections here. So this was a long building with lots of different chambers and rooms, I would say. And what we're seeing is possibly the remains of the roof structure here, which is all eroded and collapsed down. And these are probably parts of the roof. And there were probably struts under here, maybe stone columns or struts holding this up. And it's all heavily eroded and collapsed and dilapidated. But you can still see that this was a building, okay? And also up here we have some more block work here. We've got just here, let's make this a bit smaller, okay? We've got a square block here. We've got blocks here and here and here. Now it's better if you actually look at it down here, because I've done an enlargement of that and brightened it up, and you can actually see, if we're going close, we can see here an almost perfectly square stone block right there, okay? It's at a slight angle at the top, but you can see that this is construction. You wouldn't see something like that on a random mountainside. This is construction. And you can see other blocks here. There's another one here and here. Okay, got the corner of it there. This is heavily eroded and fallen down, a lot of it, but we've got block construction here, right? You can actually see the different blocks. And what I think they were doing with their construction, there's another one here, right? But this comes down right down to here, obviously. This would go right down into the ground, I would imagine, and a lot of this is buried. And what I think they were doing basically is they were building with large blocks and then concreting over the top. And what we've got here is a mixture of exposed block work, which is underneath, and then on top you can see this material up here, right? This is concrete. So we have concrete on top of block construction. You can see more blocks in here. You can see some of the blocks. There's another one there, another one here. But a lot of it has concrete over the top of it. And you can see the concrete here, right? This is concrete construction on top of block work, large stone block work, okay? Quarried straight out of the mountainside here. So a lot of these structures were probably cut out of the mountainside and built on the spot and then concreted over. And what we've got is exposed block work where the concrete is cracked and fallen away, and we can see the construction underneath it, okay? And I have shown many examples of this before. I'll put one or two clips of those things I've found before in as well. But you can see here, I mean, this is the very top of an apex structure, okay? So this would have come up like this, obviously, and then down the other side, and we've got block construction here as well, but it's all heavily eroded and the stonework isn't as tight or sophisticated as you would see on Earth in places like Cairo, Egypt, where the Great Pyramids are. It's not quite that level of construction. It's a bit more crude. It's block work and concrete, basically. It's practical. It was probably a lot easier to build and a lot quicker to build than just pure, tight, large block sandstone, okay? So that's what it is. We have here basically a ruined building, another ruined building here. We've got the very top part of one here. This one is pretty clear, and those shapes are pretty obvious. You know, once you see them, once you see these sections here, you can see the squares and angles in here, parallel angles. There's one there. You can actually see the line there, okay, coming down. This is construction, and there's another square there. And this probably goes right down into the ground. Now, estimated height of this thing at the back here, probably about 25 feet, I would say. Maybe 30. Don't know exactly. Maybe 40. We got some just crazy stuff here. And in the foreground, we just mostly got a pile of rocks and pebbles and stuff like that, like we normally have in the area. Some of them look very strange, but there's nothing outstanding here, really, apart from the giant skull, which is over here, okay? Now, I'm trying to work out exactly how far away this is. It's quite a long way, because the rover is right down here at the bottom, and if you go across diagonally, this is probably about 50, 60 feet away from the rover, maybe 70. And it's still quite large, so this is at least twice the height of a human skull. It could be 3 times. So when I say it's about 18 inches, it may be 24 inches. It may be 27 inches, I don't know exactly. But I'm going to go with around 20 inches for now. It's a bit larger than twice the size of a human skull, I would say. But I won't write that in stone because I'm not sure. But it is large. For it to show up that big from that distance, it has to be at least double the size of a human skull in height. In capacity, it could be as much as 8 to 10 times human cranial capacity, which makes it absolutely insanely large in that respect, okay? Absolutely insane. I mean, you've got this huge bulbous skull coming around like that, and these wrinkly sort of brain-like details, okay? This is similar to others that I've shown before that have this kind of brain-like structure on the outside of the skull, okay? It's very interesting, and it's such a shame that these images aren't in focus and sharp, because if this was, this would be irrefutable. But the fact that I found so many of these, hundreds in fact, I found of skulls and statues and that kind of thing, of heads, mainly skulls and heads. The fact that I found so many means that it only takes one of them to be correct for this to be real, of course. And if I have over 200, which I do, then the chances of me being correct are very large indeed, okay, when you work out the odds. Because if we'd only found one, then you could argue and say it was pareidolia. If it was 2, you could say, well, coincidence. But when you get to 200 plus, is that a coincidence? No, it's not. We have a real phenomena here. There was life on Mars. They were building, they were constructing using block work, concrete. You can see clear, I mean, on this part here, you can see these blocks clearly. I mean, look at that. That's perfectly square. And I've been eyeing this block up for quite a long time because you can see it from miles away. It's so perfect. The edges are so perfect. You can see it from like 2 miles away in some of the earlier images from the rover. And it's really well defined. And it's a good example, this, because usually they're in such a sorry state, these structures, that everything's kind of collapsed and eroded down. But this one is still relatively square. I mean, the edges are absolutely perfect, really. So I would say that's pretty irrefutable evidence that we have block construction with concrete over the top. You can see some of the sort of rough concrete over the top of it here. And it's all kind of dilapidated and falling down onto the ground here, right? And then we have a perfect, almost perfect square, large square block just there. Now this is big. If we look on the pan here, it's over here, right? This is big. How big would you say that is? It's a long way off. I would say it's about, oh my God, 100, 200 meters away, 150, I don't know, over 100 meters away, and it's rather large. I would say this block is probably about 10 feet in size. It could be 20. Let's try and work it out. Now, if this ridge here is, let's say this is 25, it's a bit further away than that. That's probably about 35 feet high-ish. Yeah, I would say this is about 10 feet, and it probably goes right down into the ground like this. We're only seeing this part of it, really. So if they had any sense, they would have cut the rock right here from the bedrock and then built around it. So a lot of this stuff may have been quarried very, very locally and then not really moved very far at all, like you see in places like Baalbek in Lebanon and in places like Turkey and in Egypt and Central and South America, where you have these huge constructions like pyramids. They usually quarried most of the stone very locally, and only the interesting internal stones, which have electrical properties, were brought from quite some distance away, often 50 or 100 miles away, like you have in Egypt, where some of the internal block work, massive, full of mica, were brought from 500 miles away up the Nile, okay, from Aswan and places like that. So it would make sense for the Martians, at least, to quarry it locally and build with local materials and then cover stuff in concrete afterwards, I would assume, because that just makes more sense. So a lot of this is construction. This thing here is very strange. It's all broken up. This may be natural, but we've got a very long, straight kind of part to it there, but it's kind of leaning, so I'm not really sure about that. And we've got this rather strange mound up here with sort of boulders just on the top of it, which is rather strange. And then there was another thing here, which is like a little H block. Just here, we have an H block. Now that looks like construction to me, like you would see at Pumapunku in South America. An H shape, but it's very unclear what's going on here. It's out of focus. It's a bit far away and blurry. I will take some extra clips of these things anyway and put them in at the end for you, as well as a bunch of other large skulls that I've found. This is huge. So this is in the realm of around 20 inches, like some of the others that I've found. It's about the same size, and it looks like the same species as well. Very interesting, and you've got quite pronounced nostril detail here. Nostrils there, mouth. A very sort of sullen looking eye there, and another one just poking out the edge like that. Interesting, okay. So there we have it. Not only do we have a very large skull, but we have a structure up here. The very top of a structure, we have a long butte structure, which is in fact a building coming right across here. Then we have over here, we have the giant mound. At the base of the giant mound here, we have a perfect block, which is probably somewhere between 10 and 20 tons, because this may be rectangular and go right down like this, and it may go back further as well. So this could be huge. In fact, we're only seeing one face of it, okay? So we've got multiple things going on here. We have construction, and we have evidence for previous life in the form of a giant skull. Okay, so thanks for watching. Check out the clips coming up in a few seconds. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.